Jason, thanks so much for coming on the show.
I'm super excited to be here. It's been fun to get in touch with you over the course of this crazy year. So yeah,
Yeah, I was thrilled. I was like, oh, we have to have Jason on. We're going to talk about the film. We're going to talk about what is so cool about the film and the project that you did. I feel very fortunate that I've gotten a sneak peek at things, and it's super inspirational. We watched it in our living room and just were floored. My husband's from Washington, from the Cascades, and he was like, I want to do that and that one and that link up. So you've lit a fire in him as well. So it's really, really cool. I think it's going to speak to lots of people. But part of the reason why I wanted to reach out to you is that you took on this insane project. You were looking at getting your 100th FKT, and you thought, why not run 100 summits for that 100th FKT? So can you just walk us through like what is the 100 Bulgers project and what that like does, like set the stage for the listeners there, because I think we want to get all their brains wrapped around the magnitude of that
yeah,
project.
absolutely. So yeah, that 100th FKT project by itself, and that I think people get confused there. There's kind of two projects going on. It's like there's the 100 FKTs, which was an ongoing 3-year project to just do different, either established or new FKTs. And then for number 100, so 99 already done. For number 100, it was an odd bit of poetic justice to take on a 100 peak list. And there are these different peak lists all around the country and all around the world, groupings of peaks geologically or by state. And the one for the state of Washington, their list of their 100 tallest peaks happens to be named after the group of people who originally did them. They went by the Bulgers. And so it's got a weird name, but it is a peak list. And people have been chasing times on, the Colorado 14ers and even the Colorado Centennials, or, Colorado's 100 highest for quite some time. And it's, gone back and forth. And I was looking for this, being a school teacher, I was looking for sort of this cumulative final exam, right? That's just how my mind works at this point after a decade of teaching. And I wanted it to be a real test piece that accented all of the skills and styles that I'd had to use and grow previously in the previous 99 FKTs. And the Bulgers list was just to a whole different level than other peak lists. One of the ways that helps convey part of this is 100 peaks. And if you just look at the height of them, like a lot of them are in the 8,000 foot range, between 8,000 and 9,000. So you might think, oh, that's not that hard. That's easy. It's like, no, if you're generous with your description of a trail, if you're very generous with your description of a trail, 4 of them have a trail to the top. Every other peak involves glacier travel, involves technical rock climbing, involves heinous temperate rainforest bushwhacking. And if you image the state of Washington, as far as vertical relief per square mile, like how much does the terrain change in elevation over a given square mile, the only place in the United States that you can find more elevation change per square mile is if you take certain aspects of Denali in Alaska. That's like the only place where you get more vertical change. So it's extremely rugged, extremely steep terrain with a ton of flora and fauna. It's yeah, I didn't realize exactly what I was signing up for when I did. It's like people kind of made me aware with little hints saying like, "Oh yeah, terrain determines speed, not fitness." I would hear things like that all the time, like, "Oh yeah, you think you're going to be able to move fast through here? You think you're going to be able to do better than what we're telling you, but you're
No.
not."
No, my husband is from the Cascades and his parents were like friends with Fred Becky, right? So like the guy who got up these things first in a lot of ways. And they were following one of his like descriptions out some drainage, and it said like, "Oh, you can average about 1 mile an hour." And it took them 8 hours to go 1 mile down this drainage. So we'll brag about how amazing Washington and the Cascades, all the way through Oregon, right? The Cascades are amazing, but also you gotta love Slide Alder and you gotta love Devil's Club, I think, if you really want to get into what's so cool about there. I'm wondering, we'll talk some technical stuff and then we're going to kind of tie in some life story here. But um, How many of those peaks, so there's 100 of them that you had to go do, how many of them had you done previous to starting this project?
I had climbed Adams and I'd climbed Rainier
So you're
previously.
on-siting the
Yeah,
other
on
98 of
sighting
them.
98 peaks. Yeah.
Classic. Okay, and then I love the description of like this culmination of training that you had done from all these other FKT projects over the previous 3 years, right? You have really technical terrain, and you're looking at some really long days, like with the link ups and the logistics of getting into some of these zones. So from a kind of from like an athlete holistic like training perspective, I mean, obviously it's a culmination of years of work, but at the same time, like when you got your eyes looking at this summer long project with ultra length days in it plus skills, like how can an athlete think about trying to put that all together? That seems like a huge undertaking.
Oh man, so many different ways to slice that. I think as far as starting somewhere and progressing toward that, I kind of came out of ultra endurance and endurance sport. Ran in high school, ran in college, and then got into marathons. Biked across the USA when I graduated college, so started picking up biking as another form, and then I got into triathlon. So like I built like this mindset like, oh, this is how you do multi-sport. When you're integrating different skills, you need to practice your swimming and your biking and your running and your transitions between them. So I'd already kind of acquired this like mental process that it was normal to mix sports and to just you sit down and you figure, okay, the fastest integration of these two looks something like this. um, and also then how to practice multiple skills and multiple fitnesses, if you will, at the same time. um, so I guess the process was one, a lot of people know who know my story at all know I had a big car accident in 2015 that took away my running, among other things. It was pretty severe, and I could basically walk and I could swim and I could use my upper body because my upper body was relatively undamaged other than 9 broken ribs and a shoulder that was messed
Casual.
up. Um, so I started climbing. I started well. One thing led to another. As I started hiking, and then hills led to bigger hills, and then to mountains, and then finally I got to bigger mountains and mountains that had technical summits. And I was like, okay, I guess I need to learn to be a rock climber. So joined the local climbing gym and was literally just the worst person there, like laughably bad. There were like 11-year-old kids who could climb things I couldn't climb. People would be like, "Oh yeah, grab that jug," climbers jargon for an easy hold
Yeah.
that you should be able to rest on. And I would like not be able to hang on to the thing they considered a jug. Um, and so just had to go through this process of being willing to suck at something new. Um, and it's like a different style of training. It's like more power based, more strength based. Um, so it actually ended up integrating well with trying to continue and build back my endurance fitness, because I could use very different. It is a very different mindset and a very different training process to build that power and strength to be confident in my rock climbing moves. And so you kind of look at how those fit together in a training week, in a training month, and go, okay, I'll be doing these things that are strength and power for my climbing and skills related for my climbing. And that's the nice part about a lot of the technical skills as well, is a lot of the skills, it's like you're not tying your rappel skills, they're non-energy intensive, they're just mentally intensive to make sure you can dial them out correctly when you need to. um, so it's not terribly difficult to integrate a broad skill set into an ultra endurance training week and just go, okay, like on this day I'll be doing rope skills and rappelling, and on this day I'm going to be doing along with my long run I'll also do um, some finger hanging drills and build that finger strength. It's like kind of just seeing how those things fit together. So then you fast forward that for 3 years of integrating that and then creating different expressions of it through the FKTs I did. I got very into run plus scramble type stuff in Yosemite and in Red Rocks. One of my favorites that was kind of a personal vendetta was soloing the entire solar slab route there, which is
Cool.
one of the tallest 5-6 routes in the country. And I don't know why it just got stuck in my head. I'm like, I want to do this. And getting to a place where I could comfortably solo that whole thing was a big part of the journey for me.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that obsession in a second because I think there's threads of kind of obsession throughout your entire existence, really from being a kid. But tying back into training just for one more second, you're an elementary school gym teacher,
I
and
am,
you're
yeah.
and you're kind of honestly there's a bunch of really like cool, amazing endurance folks who are also gym teachers in our sport. Like Tyler Green is a gym teacher. There's a bunch of teachers, but it's like I was talking to Tyler the other day about like his job. I was like, I didn't know you were a gym teacher. I knew you worked in education. So I think it's kind of cool that like we've got these people who are inspiring the next generation as well. So what does training look like in and around? Obviously, this FKT fit into your summer break really nicely, but what does training look like with your day job alongside all of that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like normally right now, this is my lunch break that we're recording on. I'd be out for a lunch run. I'll do different activities with the students, and like in my head, I know like, oh, this is me picking up bits of finger hanging or while I demonstrate, and then I'll
Yeah.
do a few reps with the students through the day to get in like sneak in little bits of extra training time, which it's kind of lucky with the job I have, but also it's inspiring to my students, and I think that's probably why we find uh, people who pair teaching with this sort of a lifestyle is you avoid that hollow emptiness at the end of a big effort because there's a reason beyond just finishing it. It's like, oh, now I get to go inspire with it. So it almost makes the whole thing operate at a higher level because the whole time you're doing something big, like this is going to matter to someone more than me.
Yeah, there's a
Even if
why.
it's just those little tiny souls that run around in my gym screaming while playing tag, like at least they benefit from this.
Oh yeah, and they're the happiest screaming little kids I'm sure. And they probably I mean my high school cross country running coach ran ultras and I thought he was crazy. And now like look at us sitting here being like, oh, okay, that's like totally normal. But your story is interesting having watched the movie as well as that, you were a kid who couldn't sit still. You have this kind of obsession as well of like, okay, I'm gonna break this time in the mile. I need to run. And then running becomes triathlon and it builds now into mountain time. Like, what do you think it is about you that kind of gravitates towards this kind of like you get this idea, you get this bug in your head, and it's like, okay, this is the thing. Like soloing that route, for example. It was like this obsession that kind of came on and stuck.
So what some people would describe as the weakness of ADHD. I was a kid that grew up with ADHD, very impulsive behavior, all sorts of problems it created for me with relationships and school systems and things like that. But as much as people would say, like, oh man, like ADHD is a huge detriment to your ability to successfully integrate into society, and become a useful worker, the superpower with it is you're absolutely unable to bring yourself to do things that don't have meaning. Like
Hmm.
I could hyper focus on anything I could express myself in, or I could find meaning or like a sense of growth. And I just couldn't do anything if someone just said, do this because I said so. It's like I couldn't get it done. Like couldn't get homework done. Could sit back and understand the concepts if like the teacher could convey it in a way that I could see the value. Like I would easily wrap my mind around and master difficult concepts. Um, but like getting that homework done of the concept that I mastered already, like I couldn't bring myself to do it. So I'd like rely on test scores and things like that. But to continue what I was saying, I think where that becomes a superpower is because you're unable to be distracted by all the things everybody tells you you need to do and you have to do, because you're unable to spend time just making that a routine. You have to orient yourself around meaning. And so for my whole life, I've been practicing orienting myself around the things that give me a sense of meaning and forward progress in life. And what that looks like is obsession, right? Where I find that thing that I see value in, that connects with me, that resonates, and suddenly I'm able to focus on it with indefinite energy, unlimited energy for the tiniest bit of progress. And so I would say that's the root, and that's actually, if there's a lesson someone can take from this film and from my life, is there's value in that, to orient yourself around those things. and to not just be going through all the routines that society and our parents and whoever else has said, these are the checklists you have to follow for life.
Yeah, it
Um,
gives obsession that like a negative connotation, and obsession doesn't have to be negative, right? It can mean meaning or direction instead,
Absolutely.
which I think is really important. That's really powerful. I think a lot of people have strengths that are also weaknesses, or seen as could be weaknesses, but the exact same quality in them is also their biggest strength, be it their competitive nature or their motivation or their drive or their ability to tolerate pain or whatever it is. You see a lot of this in our sport in general, is that all those things provide immense superpowers, but also can be the thing that like derails you to some degree as well, which I think is just a really interesting. Like, I'm gonna every single interview I do from now on is just gonna be sports psych. We're just gonna keep digging into that. No one wants it, but I'm here for it. Okay, so it's not obsession, it's motivation, it's drive. You have meaning in all these directions that are kind of pulling you, and then you're culminating this 100 FKT project in this Bulger Summer Summit project. What like why was that the thing? Like why of all the things that you could have done, looking at your summer break from being an elementary school PE teacher, what was it that captivated you about that project and doing it in such a short period of time? Because historically, people have done it over many years or over a whole calendar year. Trying to like fit it into a very short window seems like a very daunting but very intriguing task.
Yeah, I mean, again, so many layers there. An element of it is it's the Pacific Northwest. I was born and raised in Oregon. So it was kind of home turf in a way, even though Washington is a separate state. It's kind of similar geographically, um, geologically as well. The Cascades are kind of iconic. They're in the mountaineering world. They're a great test piece. Many mountaineers spend a great amount of time in the Cascades before going other places. Um, so there's that element to it. Um, as far as like why would I want to, because the previous record was 410 days, so why didn't I just go do it in 409 days? Um, to me, it was about finding something that, again, talking about that meaning and that purpose and that direction, that question of what's something I can do in the world that is an odd way of saying it, I guess, like the greatest burden that could be possible for me, but I'm also interested in.
Mhm.
And we already talked about how it has all these technical elements, this orienteering and this route finding and glacier travel and rock climbing. And so it had all these elements of things I knew I was in love with the experience of like being inside that moment, right? I knew I loved that. And I know that something that amplifies an experience in nature for me is a clock running. Like when I feel like I'm pushing myself, right? That's what drew me into this whole FKT thing to begin with. I was already out there running around in the mountains once my running came back after the car accident. I was already doing this, and I discovered FKTs after the fact. And I actually had to go backlog a couple of cool routes that I came up with after the fact, because I was just already like in love with what can I do and how hard and fast can I do it. That feeling of I'm bringing my very best to a beautiful and challenging part of nature. For me, that's always been the marriage that creates the best experience. Um, so there was that element of it as well, and this idea of like, okay, what is the very best I can bring to this project? And that's why the aim became 50 days, because after doing all of 6 months of planning and calls with people who'd climbed different peaks and finding GPS information and route descriptions and compiling all of this, and sorting out like how to mitigate fire risk and how to select which order to do which routes and what link ups were efficient and which ones weren't. Like after doing all of that, um, the very best I thought I could do was going to be right around that 50-day mark. Maybe just a day or two under, maybe just a day or two over. Um, and so, yeah, it was super amazing, actually. A sense of deep satisfaction. The way I phrased it right after finishing was hard work well done. a feeling of hard work well done, just being very like deeply pleased with what I'd done, because I thought it was possible to do 50 days, and I did 50 days, 23 hours, 43 minutes. Like, to sprint down that final mountain, racing the clock to stay in that day mark of what I'd predicted, just felt it all was right with the universe.
Yeah, that's pretty satisfying, I would say, to be like, wow, we really nailed that prediction. Like, I thought this is what I was capable of. I thought that's what we were capable of. Because it's obviously,
Yeah,
although
the group
yes,
effort. Yes.
you ran every step. And that's how I feel about like my TRT, for example. It's like I keep saying we did it because I couldn't have done it without the people I did it with. So talking to that a little bit, like what did it look like that 6 months of planning to get to the start of this thing? Like what did that look like from like getting all the logistics together of biggest days, linking these things up in the right direction, having climbing partners for some of those things, and then also mitigating the fact that like to get into some of the northern parts of the Cascades, like normally we go through Canada to get to a lot of that stuff, and you couldn't do that with the pandemic. So what did that look like as far as like prepping for things to go as right as possible, but knowing that things could go wrong as well?
Oh man. I guess I'll say that at every step, even when I, started the watch and took the first steps for the project, but on every step along the way with the planning, there was this just embracing the high probability that it would all end in failure, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that it couldn't be done in the way I thought it could be done. And just having to thrive in spite of, or maybe even because of that chaos, that I was trying to reach into the chaos, something undone, something in a way no one had ever thought to do it, or at least executed on their
Mm-hmm.
thinking to do it. Um, there's this element of like, yeah, I could be as ridiculous as some people think I am, and this could be absolutely impossible, and I might step out there and get absolutely shut down, and have this stuffed back in my face, and just having to embrace all of that every step of the way was a part of the journey. And yeah, I think as far as planning, at first it was just, because I was, as we already alluded to, I was on sighting 98 of these peaks. So it was, I started by listing the hardest obstacles I would face, and like corresponding with people who'd done the list and people who were currently doing this list, like what are the key challenges and risks, hazards I'll face. And starting with that and assessing, are any of these outside of my technical capabilities? And when I saw that there was basically one rock climbing move that normally I wouldn't be willing to solo, but it was like a boulder problem with a ledge below, so it's like, okay, I'll do that. I'm willing to do that solo, because if something goes wrong, like I can just hop back down to the ledge. So very cleanly and clearly being able to assess that, like, okay, I'm willing to solo on up to 5-7 rock terrain. Are how many of these peaks fall outside of that category? And basically, like I said, there was a one move wonder boulder problem that went at 5-9 on Dorado Needle. And so that was kind of a crux piece that sat in my head. And then there were 5 other peaks that had 5th class climbing that was in that category of 5th class that I'm like, ooh, this could go either way. So better be prepared with at least a little bit of protection in case I need it to get through any portion. So once that was done, where it's like, okay, there's nothing outside of my technical prowess, then it's like, okay, what are the routes? What fits together? How many days is this whole project potentially possible? And then bouncing that off of people who were experienced, like, what do you think? Eric Gilbertson, the previous record holder, he was a huge help. He ran some of his own predictions on how fast he thought it could go, and we landed in the same ballpark with our first guess. And that's what made me think, okay, this does fit into a school summer. I don't have to quit my job and end my career to go do this effort.
Yeah.
I can remain a stable, healthy adult while still doing something that's absolutely
Consuming. Yeah.
consuming. Yeah, exactly. So brought that into it, figured out, okay, this is possible in the time frame that I have available. And it's pretty much the biggest thing I could fit into that time frame available as well, which made it attractive, right? Where it's like, if just a few things go wrong, like it might not fit, it might not happen. Plus the feeling of racing the fire season as well was there
Just
pushing me along.
unpredictable. Yeah. How do you like? So you've got, you've got you've assessed your challenges. You've looked at the potential outcomes. Kind of, you've asked for help, which is, I think, a very valuable part of that skill set. But then, like, there's obviously an unpredictable nature. So there's weather, there's injury, there's ultra length days in there, there's route finding, there's making mistakes. Like, how did you mentally and or prepare your crew for that perfect ultra magic of unpredictability?
Um, I mean, for me, I tend to thrive in chaos. That's another byproduct, I think, of the ADHD is everything is so chaotic for someone who grows up with that because of how our brains work. Um, that thriving in chaos is something we do fairly well. So I was ready for like all these pieces and things to go wrong, and like this will probably happen, and I'll just deal with it when it comes, and I'll figure out this route when I get there. And I've learned how to structure things together in sort of I almost think of them as separate outings or uh, pieces on the puzzle, if you will, the chess pieces on the board. And it's like, okay, these can move in different orders and they can interact with each other in different ways. So if this goes wrong, I'll move the pieces this way and hope that the status of whatever's hanging me up changes by the time I get there. One reason for doing the Chilliwax so late in the effort, which is the hard group to get to, when you alluded to having to go in through Canada, it was going to be really ridiculously hard to get to those because of Canada not being open. So part of the reason they got moved toward the back of the project was the potential the Canadian border would reopen. And it reopened 2 weeks after I finished the project. So got to go in the hard way and earn it. But assessed and made decisions that way and kind of had everything in my head laid out where it's like, okay, if this, then that. So that I knew I could make on the fly decisions about which peak groups and how they grouped up and which way they could be approached and exited from. And just had those kind of chess pieces in my head ahead of time.
I was gonna say that's interesting. It kind of reminds me of like the general ultra mindset of being like, okay, like I'm in this segment of the course, or I'm in this segment of this thing, and like trying not to get ahead of yourself. And I'm wondering, as you've got all these chess pieces in your head, and maybe this is the ADHD that allows these pieces to be so mobile and so like able to move them quickly, as opposed to maybe the rest of us who are more rigid in our mindsets because of just our the way our brains work. Like, how do you not get ahead of yourself in that too? Like, how do you not at, day one, not think about day 49?
I think part of the beauty of that is being able to hyper focus and also being aware within, just sort of my inner work with myself that it's like the whole reason I'm out doing it is for being in the moments while I'm out there doing it, not for the finish line. Like I've done enough of this to know why I'm there. And so the thing my mind, once the big, chessboard is filled out and I know how the pieces work, what I'm there for is what is the challenge I'm looking forward to today? Like,
Cool.
oh, I can't wait till that 2,000 feet of 5th class rock climbing. That's going to be epic. The views are going to be awesome. Oh, we get to traverse this glacier. Like, that's going to be awesome. I hope the crevasses aren't ridiculous. Like, what if we have to jump over a crevasse? Like, this is going to be wild. Oh man, this is going to be a heinous, 5,000 feet of downhill and 2 miles through bushwhacking terrain. Like, whoa, that's going to be heinous. So just kind of being present in the moments once the project started is something that's both a developed skill and something that I think comes fairly naturally for me. So it was very easy. And, occasionally I have to remind myself, just run the mile you're in. That's something
Mm-hmm.
the phrase we've all heard. But I don't know. It's like, I look forward to the challenges because that's why I'm there. Like I'm looking forward to that next thing. So sometimes, yeah, it was like, okay, I need to run, 20 miles of trail to get out to the thing I'm actually looking forward to. And so sometimes some of that was a little bit daunting, but it was also like, but I do have something to look forward to. So it's not that hard. And then,
Yeah.
yeah, it was kind of keeping the next day out of mind, except except I called it learning to move like an old man, because I had to approach this different than even like doing the Rainier Infinity Loop when I took down that record. It's a short enough time span that you can write checks that your body can't cash. Like you
Yeah.
can just yard sale everything out there because it's like, oh, I won't walk for 5 days. That's fine. I won't walk for 5 days, but I'll have done the thing. Well, there was no option to make a decision to write even a check for more than a cent over what my body could cash, because 3 weeks later I was still going to be out there climbing peaks and in dangerous terrain. And so to write even a little too much each day, I might be out on a fifth class, route when I have a meltdown. Like that's not an option. So yeah, I called it learning to move like an old man, where I was like thinking, okay, how many times am I landing on my right foot versus my left foot when I hop over a downed tree?
Yeah.
Down to these little things like, okay, how much impact force while running downhill, and yeah, just paying attention to things normally I would not even consider because I would be too focused on just pushing harder and going faster.
Yeah.
Uh,
That speaks to like that unknown though, right? It's like this effort was finally long enough that it was like truly entering the unknown for you. Like how obviously like you seem to have handled the unpredictability of a FKT like this really well. Like what you said you had to learn to move like an old man, but like how, akin to unpredictability, like that unknown aspect, right? Like how does one meter out this effort with the hopes that on day 40 or 42 or 48, like people feel this way about mile 80 of 100 too, of like what's going to happen for the next 20 miles? Like how did you approach the unknown, because you don't get to do those distance jumps very often like this?
um, I just believed that the sense of meaning and the passion would sustain me during the difficult times. It always had in the past, and so I leaned in that I was going to be motivated by that sense of purpose, because I'd chosen something that was aligned with, when you sit down to plan something. I always find that putting the pencil to the paper is very revealing, because if you put the pencil to the paper to really finally turn a dream into a reality and your motivation decreases, it's a sign that on some intuitive instinctual level it's not the right time or it's not possible. When you put the pencil to the paper and motivation increases, it's a sign that somewhere deep in there's a part of you that really knows, like, yeah, this is it. Like this thing I've been dreaming of is actually, it can become a reality. Um, and I'd had that experience as I put the pen to the paper on this one, and so it was kind of this faith, if you will, that's like, no, like when the hard days come and my Achilles tendons are both swollen and I'm thrashed and I had a day where I couldn't get any food down, so now I'm calorie deprived and trying to catch back up, and the muscle cramps are setting in and I'm still trying to make fourth class and fifth class route climbing moves. That in those moments where it was scary and uncomfortable and it hurt, that I was still going to go, this is fucking awesome.
Yeah. I was about to ask you like did like what went wrong, but it sounds like, it wasn't perfectly smooth sailing. It sounds
Oh
like
no.
there were some melties out there.
Oh yeah. I mean, I was in a completely unbuilt out van during the, like, a hollowed out tin can of a van, because my previous van had broken down right before this effort. So I had to scramble and get into something else. And all I could find was just an unbuilt cargo van. So this 100+ degree heat wave, like one of the hottest ones on record in Washington, rolls through. Um, and I'm in this tin can, right? So really difficult to get good sleep, really difficult, changes the logistics to try to occasionally like get a hotel room for a night and have some air conditioning and a shower. Um, things like that. I had a day where trying to work out all the logistics with the film crew coming out, and that same, heat stress, planning stress, like moving the chess pieces. Um, then our pizza, because they were understaffed, like never showed up. Ordered a pizza, never showed up. So the crew, had to go pick it up. And we ended up being up late instead of getting extra sleep. Ended up with less sleep. Um, and just all this stress. Like woke up the next day with my stomach just turned inside out. Like for the whole day, pretty much couldn't get food down. and still out like bagging 5 peaks that day. Just unable to eat, deep in the back country. Just kind of wondering, like, is this it? Like, if at some point, if I can't put calories in and I keep burning calories out, like the whole system shuts down and it's game over. Um, Luckily it turned around about 3/4 through the day and was finally able to put stuff back in. But just say, sort of abiding that, like, yeah, I'm extremely uncomfortable. I feel like vomiting. I can't eat. But I've been in situations where this has turned back for the better in the past. And so I'll abide the discomfort and keep moving forward and believe that it'll turn around again. So a bunch of situations like that. Another one that comes to mind is a fire did break out that shut down Highway 20.
Yep.
And I had to divert all the way around instead of what would have been like a 15-minute drive to get to the trailhead I wanted, turn into an 8-hour drive to get to the trailhead I wanted. And I had to, again, move those chess pieces because a few of the peaks I was going to do a bit later were right next to the fire, or were relatively close to the fire, not right next. I didn't feel like it was high risk and the land wasn't closed. But I'm like, just in case the wind shift, which
Yeah.
could put these peaks in jeopardy, I need to flip the schedule around and just go hard to tag these 3 peaks with, smoke in the air and a fire burning right nearby, and just go for it. And so just committed and jumped in, to go quickly tag those 3 peaks, and just being able to like do that. And that was actually a low point because Ashley, who, my significant other, she was a huge support person, helping run base camp and hiking stuff in along trails where I could do a big peak link up and then drop down for a restock and like sleep in a tent and then go hit the next big peak link up right from there instead of having to go all the way out and all the way back in. She had to be gone because she was leading an all women's guided trip on Mount Shasta. And so she was gone for a chunk of time with that. And then also my climbing partner at the same time had to be the one who'd become Nathan Longhurst, who became the youngest person to finish this whole list because of our partnership, which I think is one of the coolest
It's so
outcomes
cool.
of this. Like, so stoked. And now he's on to his own really big project. He's going to take on the SPS list this year here, starting in less than a month now, which is a list of 248 peaks of the Sierras. So people want someone to follow. That's someone to follow this year. But yeah, he was gone because his sister was getting married. So I'm solo, fire breaks out. I'm exhausted, alone, have to like scramble logistically, have to check, like, is it all over? Is one of the peaks I haven't climbed on fire? Like, that
Yeah.
emotional turmoil while sleep deprived, exhausted, trying to drive myself, trying to feed myself. And I remember that first part of the trail out onto this big, like 40-mile push, to link these peaks up, just being at a huge emotional low and
Yeah.
just struggling to have the motivation to move forward, and just like wrestling with that and wrestling with that and wrestling with that. And I rounded this corner and like stuff was kind of starting to come together in my head. And then the view of the peaks I was going to climb, like I rounded a corner and they came into view on the horizon and they were catching kind of the alpenglow of the evening. And it was just like, at that moment, I remember like the pieces fell in, like, it's going to be okay. You're doing something you love. Just go do it. And it was just like, yeah, okay, everything's going to be all right.
That's so cool. Well, while we kind of, I mean, I want to talk to you about this for forever, but we're gonna abide by your lunch break here. So we're gonna slowly round, like, bring things back together. The film, I've gotten to see it, Journey to 100. So cool. Tell us, what do you hope people get from it? When can people get it? Where can people see it? What should we be looking out for? Tell us about that coming to life, because it's really cool.
Absolutely. I'm really excited about it. I mean, it's an awesome short documentary. It's 30 minutes long. It covers a bit of the background we talked about, me being a kid that didn't easily just fit into the mold of society. It covers my journey to pursue running and pursue these athletic outlets through my life, and how the car accident came along and kind of set me back. Um, and then it really focuses in on this journey to 100 FKTs that's consumed me for the last 3 years. Um, but a lot of the footage is from this Bulgers effort. Um, the 100 peaks. So yeah, I think what people are going to take away from it, and what I really hope people take away from it, is this sense that if you can if you can orient yourself around that thing you find meaning and purpose and passion in, and 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 you dig in to the skills and the processes and the systems that move you toward actualizing the dreams you have in it. You put that pen to the paper, and you listen to that intuition that says, yes, this is the way, or not quite this one yet. um, that you're going to find yourself doing these wild and unbelievable things, these things that people told you wouldn't happen and couldn't happen and your body wouldn't be capable of. um, and all of that is kind of laced into these 30 minutes. And the creative team, like, I can't take credit for it. I just go climb mountains and teach kids, but the creative team did such an amazing job of conveying all of that in and more, I think.
It's beautiful. It's
in
like
in
the
in that 30
imagery is
minutes
really, really cool. We were all have knowing that area too well. Like it was like, oh yeah, that's a good link up. Oh, that's a good peak. Okay, so it's really, really beautiful. We encourage you all to watch it. When is it out yet? No, when is it
It's
out?
I think the next chance to see it, it's gonna show with the Vancouver International Film Fest.
So
I'll make
cool.
sure you have a link for that, for the description. Then the big Athletic Brewing was the sponsor. They've been awesome to work with. Being a PE teacher, health teacher, like, I love their product because, no, I guess this is the real way to convey it. While I was doing this effort, I had some branding because they helped me when my van broke down, because they
Yeah.
wanted to see this effort come through. So they helped me get into a new van, and people came up because of Athletic Brewing being on the side, just to tell me, like, your product changed my life. I'm like, okay, it's not mine. Like, I'm just an athlete for them, but that's so amazing. And how could I not, as a teacher, be behind something that's a tool that people turn their life around with? To me, it's like a no brainer. Like, I love it. Like, I'll be a fan, whether I'm still their
Forever.
athlete, 5 years from now or not, I'm going to be a fan, because those moments where people came up, tears in their eyes, yeah, those memories aren't ever going to leave.
That's so
But
cool.
yeah, back to being on track. You can watch the big film launch with Athletic Brewing is going to start in Brooklyn, April 9th. We're going to do a showing and a talk there, a conversation and a question and answer. It'll then go to Denver, I think, on April 23rd. And then we will be in Seattle May 7th. And I think Portland is either the week before or the week after. A little fuzzy on my numbers there. I'll make sure you get that to put in the show description.
Okay.
And then it'll launch on Outside TV to be able to stream
So cool.
in your home mid-May. So that's the current plan.
We'll keep plugging it. I'm really excited for people to see it. I think it makes you want to go on your own adventure, and I think that's the goal of everything that you're doing. We're going to end it there for today so that you'll be able to get back to your students on time. Jason, thank you so much for giving us your lunch break.
Corinne, this was a pleasure.